Welcome. My name is Alan Margate, and this is the first video of the channel, Anatomy of a Monster Stock. In this video, we will be analyzing stocks that have gained over 100% in a short time frame. We will look at the technical and fundamental events that triggered the large move in the stock. The goal is as we review these monster stocks, we will see repeating patterns that you can utilize to find future monster stocks and profit from. Today, we will be analyzing the monster stock, Nvidia. This is a stock chart of Nvidia from its IPO date to today. Nvidia went public on January 22nd, 1999 at $12 a share. Since then, it has had 6 stock splits, with the latest stock split being a 10-for-1 stock split in June 2024. If you bought one share when Nvidia went public, it would be worth an outstanding $66,000 as of December 2024. If you bought $1,000 worth of Nvidia when it went public, it would be worth over $5 million today. And it's outstanding growth, and it is the reason why I love the stock market. We will be taking a look at Nvidia during its most recent monster run, from the low in October 2022 at around $12 or $13 a share to June 2024, where it rose to over $130 a share. And that is about or over a 1,000% move. Now, a little bit about this chart. This is a candlestick chart, and I have the 10, 20, 50, and 200-day moving average. The 10 days in white, 20-day is in green, 50-day is in yellow, and the 200-day moving average is in red. On the bottom part, you will see volume, and I have a 50-day moving average as it relates to volume. Today, we will be looking at 5 triggers that led to this explosive move. The first trigger being in February 2023, the second trigger being in May 2023, the third trigger being in January 2024, fourth trigger being in February 2024, and then the last trigger in May 2024. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Nvidia at its October 13th, 2022 low. If you look at the right side, you see that on October 13th, the low was about $10.81, and it closed at $11.96. Today, on December 10th, 2024, the price is roughly around $134. This represents over a 1,000% price increase in a little bit over 2 years. So this is the price adjusted. This is the price based on the adjustment of the stock split of a 10-for-1. So let's go ahead and take it back on what the price would be on October 2022. So I'm going to unadjust for the splits. And so you see here, the price was actually around $120. So what you see here is an engulfing pattern. It's engulfing the price the day before and on a little bit above average, about 140%. From a trade perspective, I normally do not like to invest in a stock that it's below its 200-day moving average. And you can see the 200-day moving average is about $196. So from a trading perspective, for an investment perspective, I would not recommend buying it, but if you wanted to go ahead and speculate, that's fine. So let's go ahead and move on and see how the stock moved. So you see the stock kept going up, kept moving up, and then it reaches its 200-day moving average, and that acts somewhat like resistance because it moved down from there, and then it eventually moved past the 200-day moving average. And then we're going to approach our first trigger date, which is February 23rd, 2023. So they announced earnings that day for Q4 2023. And what you see happen here is a big gap up, a um, about a 14% move on humongous volume. Volume uh, was double what it normally is. That 111 million shares were traded. Normal 50-day moving average for volume is about 48, 49 million shares. So fantastic volume. If you were to buy on this day or the next day, it did go lower in about 12 trading days, but if you put a 5% stop loss, so if you gave it room to go below for another 5%, you would have been safe. Okay. So if you bought around this time, let's take a look. And I'm going to move this back to split adjusted. But if you bought around this time and say you sold, if you sold just fairly recently, okay, sorry, I am having a hard time here, but the very peak, you would have made 500 over a 500% move in a little bit under 2 years. Okay. So this would have been a fantastic trade, and it's all based on a gap up of about 14% on very heavy volume because that day was an earnings release for Q4 2023. Now, a bit of a reminder, Nvidia's year-end date is the end of January. And so when they say Q4 2023, it's really as of the earnings date in the end of January 2023. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Nvidia from a fundamental perspective as of the earnings period of Q4 2023. So when I look at uh, fundamentals, I really like to just focus on two things for growth stocks. Number one is revenue, which you'll see that in this blue line here. Uh, and number two is net income, which you'll see in this green line. I'll also include forecasted revenue and forecasted net income, and these are numbers that come straight from NVIDIA. And this is important because it gives you a perspective of how well they did versus their forecast, and also what does the future quarter look like. So this is the revenue net income numbers from Q1 2020 all the way to Q4 2023. And you'll see a pretty good increase, especially between Q1 2021 and Q1 2023. So you almost have this staircase uh, step revenue numbers, which is what you want to look at. But what you see is as starting in Q2, revenue started to diminish a little bit. And as of Q4 2023, it improved versus Q3, but it was still pretty significantly below its revenue high as of Q1 2023. What you also know is I compared and put forecasted revenue and forecasted net income. So it slightly beat on earnings and on revenue, but not significantly. Okay. And if you look at forecasted revenue and net income for Q1 2024, you see definitely a slight increase, but still below its Q1 2023 high. So analysts were happy with the numbers, but when you look at it relatively, it was a slight beat. Now let's go ahead and look at the news. And so what you'll see here is, NVIDIA shares. This is one article, and it shows that NVIDIA shares were up 14% on earnings and a bullish outlook on AI. And so what we're seeing here is a fundamental shift where NVIDIA is historically a graphics company for gaming, and now it's using their main product line, GPUs, and moving that from or growing that not only for graphics but also for data centers. And so CEO Jensen Huang said that this is potentially their iPhone moment. And a lot of analysts were optimistic about the growth of NVIDIA's AI sales and also their disciplined expense management. So we'll take a look a little bit later, but their gross margins and their net margins are just fantastic, or eventually became fantastic. So this is a little bit about the fundamentals. So in a nutshell, it was okay, not too bad. There was definitely a big gap up, but the fundamentals weren't wowing me at this moment. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the technical aspects of NVIDIA again. So here we see the February 2023 gap up. And then if we keep moving, if you notice to the right, whenever you see a gap up, I like to see that it's supported by either the 10-day or 20-day moving average. And you see that right here in March 13th, it was supported by the 20-day moving average. Then it starts making a decent move up, a little bit of sideways movement, and then another huge move. Okay. This is Q1 earnings on May 25th, 2023. This was the catalyst for this big move. It moved over 24%, almost 25% on three times volume. So the average volume is about 45 million shares. And in this case, it traded over 154 million shares on this day. So again, huge volume. And then if you put the stop loss on the low of this gap up day at $366.40, even if you put a little bit less than that, you would have been safe, and it never reached this stop loss again. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at how much you would have made if you invested around this period of time. So if you notice here, like I said, in the short term, when you see a gap up, you want to see it being supported either by its 10-day moving average or its 20-day moving average. So you can see right here, it was eventually supported around its 10-day moving average. Then it started moving up again, and then it went back down, and again supported by its 20-day moving average. But if you were to invest, and if you were to invest around this time at around $380 or split adjusted $38, you would have made over 400%. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to move this to split adjusted. So now instead of $400 or $380, it's now at $38. This takes into account the 10-for-1 split adjustment. Okay, and if you were to trade this around that time period, right, and you sold close to the high, okay, that would have been about almost a 296% move. So still a fantastic move. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the fundamentals. Now let's look at the fundamental aspects of NVIDIA during its Q1 2024 earnings release. So as you can see on Q1 2024, revenue did increase a little bit more than it did in Q4, and it definitely beat forecasted revenue and forecasted net income, but still not approaching the high in terms of revenue as of Q1 2023. But the big catalyst is the forecasted revenue and forecasted net income. What you can see here is over, I think it was around $11 billion in forecasted revenue, and around a little bit over $5 billion in forecasted net income. Now, this is really the AI play that we just mentioned a little bit earlier. So this is fantastic, and that is the reason for over 25% gap up. The good thing is, if they can keep this up, then that is what you see as the catalyst for the continued growth in the future after Q1 2024. So we'll take a good look at that. But as of now, you can see the catalyst was forecasted revenue. So important thing to remember: sometimes you want to see the reported revenue and reported net income. You want to see that grow. But if that isn't if that stays somewhat stagnant or moved up a little bit, but you see forecasted revenue grow, that is often a big catalyst. Back to technical analysis of Nvidia. So we've already went through two triggers of the five triggers that we spoke about earlier. Both of them were gap ups. Both of them were based on positive earnings release, and the latest one was based on forecasted revenue for the next quarter. So let's see how we do. So again, we see support at the 10-day moving average if we're moving from the May 25th, 2023 date. And let's keep going to the right. And so right here, you see support around the 20-day moving average, and then you see movement moving forward. And then what you see here is a lot of sideways movement for the next, I think, about 6 months or so. And so you see sideways movement here. Sideways movement is always a good sign that there's accumulation by the institutional investors. Institutional investors being banks, hedge funds, the professional investors. And so you see sideways movement roughly around mid July 2023, all the way till you reach our next trigger, which is on January 8th, 2024. Now, on January 2024, you see a move of about 6%, so less than what you've seen before. But what you do see is that it breaks through the resistance that the stock has had for the past 6 months. This little white resistance line right here. It moves past that on heavy volume on 64 million shares. Average volume for the past 50 days is around 41 million shares. So we're looking at over 150% rise in volume. And then what you also notice here is the next day, you also see a move up on increased volume, even more or heavier volume as well. So this is probably the time when the institutions decided to get together and move this stock back up. Let's also take a look at the fundamental aspects. There was not an earnings release, but Nvidia did rally as it announced new AI-related components. So nothing big here from a financial perspective, but Nvidia did start announcing some new product lines. Now back to the technical aspect of the stock. So that was the third trigger, and from there you see very strong movement, almost parabolic movement. And so it went up for another few months, and then you see it. There's a few bars, about 4 bars, moving down, and then another humongous gap up. This is a 16% move on almost double the volume. And again, this was another earnings release. You see that prior to this big move, there was support around the 20-day moving average. And that's why I like to show the moving averages here, though it is not a definitive source of support, but it is a good indicator. Yeah. So again, 14 or 16% move, and if you bought on this day and put the stop loss on the low of the day, it would not hit that stop loss again. Let's go ahead and talk about the fundamentals of Nvidia again. So last time we focused on Q1 2024, and then we noticed a big forecasted revenue, and it actually beat revenue handily and also beat net income handily. And from there, we saw 6 months about sideways movement. And as the stock was moving sideways, you could see this stair step, um, kind of looks like a set of stairs in terms of revenue growth and net income growth. Just outstanding growth. Look, if you look from Q1 2020, quarterly revenue was about $2.5 billion. And now we're looking at revenue at the 12, 13 billion range, and now at the 20, 22 billion range. And so as of Q4 2024, another outstanding quarter. Revenue far outpaced previous quarter and previous year, and also far outpaced forecasted revenue and forecasted net income. The big thing to look at here is the net margins. So, historically speaking, we're looking at a 20, 30% net margin or even less. Uh, but what you see here now, the past few quarters in Q2, Q3, and Q4 is net income approaching 50%, which is fantastic. So for every dollar that they get in revenue, after all the expenses and taxes are accounted for, they are making over 50% in net income. So not only is there humongous revenue growth, but they are keeping most of that money as well. And then what you see in Q1 2025 is continued forecasted revenue and forecasted net income that, as you can see from prior history, they will probably outbeat that too as well. Let's take a quick look at the news. This article shows that Nvidia popped up 16% based on AI fueled growth. The company reported revenue of $22 billion for its fiscal fourth quarter, and that's a rise year over year of 265%. That is fantastic. But what's even better is net income surged over 769%. The earnings beat Wall Street estimates, and it's driven by a lot of the big tech companies like Microsoft and Meta buying huge amounts of GPUs from Nvidia. Let's go back to the chart. So we saw here the big gap up on 60%, 16% price movement. And if we keep going back to the right, you'll notice that it never hits the low on February 22nd, 2024. And then it forms a base, some sideways movement, kind of looks like a cup and handle if you're a IBD follower. So right here, a little bit of cup, a little bit of handle. And then we see another gap up. This one, again, is when it reached over $1,000. It gapped up 9% on almost double volume, almost 2 times volume. And then it just continued its rise up. Okay. Let's take a look at the fundamentals. For Q1 2025, it's continued growth. This is becoming a kind of boring story already. You can see the revenue and net income are increasing, almost looking like stairs again, right? And Q1 2025, same, right? Increased revenue. Revenues probably around $25, $26 billion. Net income is around $15 billion. Great net income margin. And then you have the forecasted growth for Q2 2025 is also outstanding, and they'll probably beat that as well. So from an earnings perspective, from a fundamental perspective, revenue and net income went through the roof for several quarters, and the growth did start, or the stock move did start in Q1 2024, and then continued on throughout that. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. So we showed 5 triggers of when the stock exploded and moved up. And so let's take a look. We already showed that from the February 2023 time frame. If you bought then, it moved up 1,000%. If you bought during the um, May 2023 time frame, it moved up over almost 300%, about 275 to 300%, depending upon if and when you sell it. And then if you bought on the January 8th, 2024, it moved up over 175 to 180%. If you bought on February 2024, um, it moved over almost 100%, if not a little bit over 100% from the high. And then if you waited and bought in May 2023, you could have made uh, about 40% pretty quickly, about 35% pretty quickly. And if you waited till now or at the high on November 2024, you would have made about 45%. I hope you enjoyed this video. The goal here is to show you monster stocks that have moved over 100%, in this case over 1,000% in a short time period. In this case, it's a little bit less than 2 years. Uh, and we wanted to show you from a technical and a fundamental perspective so you can use these learnings to find the next monster stock. Thank you again for your time. I hope you enjoyed the video and hope to see you soon on the next episode of Anatomy of a Monster Stock.